Why are you here?
I'm looking for a great warrior.
So what kind of warrior have you been?
The way of the warrior.
He needed a warrior's mind.
Clearly, this was all planned by warriors of...
Warriors. Now is the time.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Shannon.
And you're listening to the Warrior Impact Podcast. And we are good to go. All right. So this is our first live recording of our podcast. Today, we're going to be going over what it means to be a warrior. So really trying to set the expectation for this podcast going forward and defining what we mean when we say a warrior. So we'll kind of start with our introductions. So I am Michael Rowland. I'm the owner of Warrior of Impact Coaching and really a bona fide living warrior. And Shannon, if you want to introduce yourself.
And I'm Shannon. I am a branding and web design specialist.
Excellent. And so when we talk about what it means to be a warrior, really my answer to being a warrior is the antithesis of, or almost the opposite of when people call themselves a survivor. I think that survival is kind of where we think about from our primal instinct of being able to get through things and by being able to stay the course. But my struggle with the word survival really is that survival implicates the sense of like a past tense approach of getting through something. You got through something as a survivor. Well, everyone I know that is a true survivor knows that the battle wages on, right? It's like you have a small victory or you have a big victory, but the idea being that it was a battle that you made it through. The war was, the battle was won, but the war is still continuing. And that's why I choose to say, I'm a warrior, because the strength that I found to get through that one moment lives in me. It doesn't just show up in that moment. It's like the whole idea between fight and flight. It's like you still have that opportunity any given day for any other choice you make. And so why not tap into that same strength that you use to get through in the survival to use that strength for everyday choices? And I think that shows up in our passion, that shows up in our day-to-day, in our heart. And so that's why I really lean towards and really engulf what I say is that warrior spirit that we find inside of us.
I agree. I 100% agree. I think when you call yourself a survivor, you still have a little bit of a victim mentality, that you were a victim and you survived it. And when you say I'm a warrior, instead of surviving it, you actively fought your way out of it. That's
right. Yeah. And I think it's important that we identify that, right? Because I think the first step to really any sort of embracing any sort of strength is to recognize the difference between being an outright victim and victimhood, right? It's like you were victimized. If you had something that was thrown against you, if you went through a struggle that was done to you or, persecuted or attacked or anything like that, you are legitimately a victim. But the difference between a victim in the name and victimhood is the choices that we make, the mentality, the mindset that we adapt. Because I think a lot of people struggle with that, right? It's embracing the fact that no, somebody did me wrong. And until you get to that point, you kind of stay in this land of victimhood unintentionally sometimes, because you just start saying phrases like, well, maybe it's me, or if the pattern continues, maybe I'm the outlier. And sometimes we have to just recognize that, the environment that we're in, the people that are around us, the situations that we're in are that legitimate, state of victim. And until we can embrace that and recognize that, I was a victim in this sense. Now educating myself and finding that struggle and strength.
I think too, victim is a passive term, whereas warrior is an active term. And so it reframes your mindset, right? It defines whether you're going to be passive in your life or whether you're going to be an active player in your life. And so I think the words that we use to describe ourselves, our situation, and our future self is very powerful, right? mindset, manifestation, talking about how you talk to yourself and how you describe yourself. And you can give yourself power by the words that you choose.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I agree. Like when I think of victim and words like survivor, like I can't help but to think like they are, like you said, they are past tense words. They are, words that are kind of like with a period at the end. It's like, I
Mhm.
was a victim, period. I was a survivor, period. Whereas I am a warrior to me flows naturally. It's very much a momentary type phrase. It's I am, and this is like to say like somebody is a victim, would be to say that they are recognizing their persecution or their struggle in the moment, which
Mhm.
I don't know that you can you can like be a survivor by the definition in real time, like you can be a warrior in real time. Like I am fighting my battle, I am conquering my demons in real time as a warrior. Like surviving it is when I got through the battle, and that's not to say that we shun the idea of survival, right? It's not saying that word and that is not in our vocabulary as much as saying the idea is to survive through embracing our strength as a warrior, and then
Exactly.
letting that take up our mantle versus the armor that we have to put up to fight through to and I hate to say it like this, but to merely survive, right? And I think that's the difference.
Right. It's thriving, not surviving, right?
Exactly. It's the pursuit and the continued pursuit versus that moment of struggle that we sit in to the till the next moment, and like that's to me like how we break patterns and really change the approach to the lifestyle. Um, so I think that's a great way to like go into our 7 elements of what, we consider a warrior. And I want to just like read them off really quickly because these are the elements that I focused on in how I work with my coaching clients. And these are the things that through my process of really discovering, hey, that thing that's inside that strength, that's your warrior spirit. These are the areas that I recognized were the areas of improvement and in life that I tapped into that found that thing for me. So the first is mindset. Second is spirituality. The third is adventure. Fourth is self-love. The fifth is visibility. The sixth is vulnerability. And then the seventh is impact. So I think that it would behoove us to kind of like break those down a little bit and really go into what we mean by those being elements of being a warrior. And my mentality is like if I was ever going to give somebody a blueprint on how to get from where they are to where I see myself in that continuing to get to the top of the mountain in this pursuit of really embracing what it means to be a warrior, I would say these are the things that, have helped me on my journey continue to grow. And these are the things that I work with my clients on to tap into their warrior spirit. And so mindset, I think, really is where we have to start because mindset is just as much about shifting our beliefs in a worldly view as it is in our beliefs that we can transform. And it's that
Right.
mental relationship, like you said, mindset is just as much about manifesting as it is about the words that we say. It's shifting I can't to I can, I will to I won't. It's those kind of aspects, but it's also just having the mental capacity to be able to sit with yourself in that element of peace. It's
Yes.
silencing the conversation just as much as it is starting the conversation.
As I said earlier, you can reframe your whole life using your mindset. And really and truly, the things that you believe are the things that happen. And so when you have the right mindset, if you think you can't, you're right.
Right.
And so if you change your mindset and you allow yourself to really think about how you can make a more positive and a more successful life, it starts with your mindset. You
Absolutely.
have to believe that you can do that.
It's the reason why we started doing the wake up like a warrior thing, right? It's
Mhm.
and like for me, like I have really fully embraced the world of woo woo. like like affirmations and meditation and going on like spiritual
Manifestation. That's my
walks
favorite.
and all of those things. But really, what all of those things are doing is really helping you transform like internally, which I don't think we really focus on enough. Like even when we talk about transition, it's usually all about the tangible, right? It's what can I see? What about the results? The true transformation comes in ways that you'll never be able to like fully show. And I think that that's why uh that second element for me is so important, which is spirituality.
Right.
And I am under the beliefs like, so I mean, I'm very much a like I have my battles of my walk with Christianity and my faith, but I also think that spirituality is our belief and connection to just a greater power in general. It is a
Right.
ability to believe and understand that we are all connected, and whether that is the universe or mother nature or God or whatever you call God, or whether you worship suns, plants, animals, or
Right.
whatever deity that believes in, or if you don't believe that that's it and you just believe in energy of sorts, the idea being that there is something rooted in a belief structure that you have this ability to connect beyond just the metaphysical, beyond
Right.
our understanding of rationale of consciousness, mind, and body, because it's that soul element that I think is really important, and that's where we oftentimes really can like gauge that transformation of
When
that
I think about
connection.
spirituality, I always think not only about the interconnectedness of everything, the universe, people, our planet, I always think about gratitude also. And I think that for me, I try to every morning when I wake up, write down 3 things I'm grateful for. And I try to allow that to frame my whole day, right? And I think that when you become more spiritual, the first thing that you realize is that you have to be grateful for what you have and where you are right now. You can't go any further on your journey if you do not show gratitude for where you are and what you already have. And I think that that is a big part of being spiritual, is being thankful and grateful for what you already have.
Right. And I think that you just nailed it, right? Like spirituality, like if we boiled it down to, it's like a relationship based off of the connection and energy that we are expelling and receiving. When two people are together, there's like that different level of connection. When we think about, whether it's that higher power or, I know that when I was out backpacking across the country, one of my favorite things to do at nighttime, because I was, camping every night, would just be to lay there. And I had this unbelievable life changing experience at the top of a mountain in Kentucky where I literally just laid out under the stars for the night. And I was like, not even tent, because I was just so zero light pollution. And it was the first time in my entire life that I was able to just lay there with my own like blind eye and see the Milky Way. And you
Right.
can't not feel and believe in something when you see it at that level, when you're just kind of like almost feeling like you're at eye level with the stars. There's just a level of connectivity that I feel we can embrace. But the beauty of that is, like you're saying, through gratitude, through our relationships, through how we engage with one another, we can certainly shine that same light and feel that same level, as we are when we look towards the stars, or when we are going barefoot in the woods. Like whatever that level of connectivity is, I think we can find it in our day-to-day lives. And I think that that's why it's such an important element of really embracing that inner strength, because
Right.
strength is not always this like you know barbarian style, like very primal nature that I think we think of. Strength, one of my favorite ideas about the warrior mindset comes from the quote of I'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And I think to me that sums up exactly how I approach it. It's like I've no longer tried to embrace this pursuit of happiness. My goal in life is to embrace the pursuit of peace. Because if,
Right. And
if I
I
know that I have the strength and don't need it, that means that I get to enjoy the peace much more.
right. And I think that when you think about it, people who stay calm and centered I almost think of them as being stronger than people who react with fierceness or anger or power. To be able to sit in peacefulness, in calmness, to be faced with things and to remain calm in the face of those things, to remain kind, to remain, like you said, peaceful. Those things are not easy. It's very easy to be angry, to lash out, to be forceful, to be powerful. But it's sometimes to be soft, to be calm, to be kind. Those sometimes are the strongest things you can be.
Yeah, and I think in life, we struggle with this thing called control, right? And I
Hmm.
think a true like the true pursuit of like being a warrior, and this comes from like really all the elements is mastering that control, but really part of that is only recognizing the fact that there's really two things that we truly control, and that is our actions and our reactions. And I think
Right.
it's yeah, it's lashing out with anger versus understanding, or it's
Right.
having that giving somebody else that power to bring out that reaction versus replying back with understanding and some grace that we should also be giving ourselves.
Right.
And I think that to me that is much more appealing. And I can't say that that's always been the case, right? There's been times where I'm like, oh, it would be just so much better to give them a taste of their own medicine. And I think that in the short term maybe gives us some relief. But I think that goes back to that mentality of like, being that victim or that survivor of saying, I want to be able to do back to you what you did to me. Well,
Right.
that's a very short term like relief that's oftentimes going to cause more long term ramifications versus being able to sever
Right.
yourself from that need to have that control or that embroiled passion in that sense.
Right. And I'm not saying that there isn't a time to fight and there isn't a time to be powerful and to show your strength. But in a lot of situations, when you come from that, you have a more powerful response if you enter that mindset with a centeredness about you that can come from your spirituality, from being really um being really confident in where your power is coming from. I think when we talk about spirituality, naturally you have to talk about faith. And when you start thinking about no matter what it is that you are drawn to or that you believe in, there's always that element of faith, right? And
Absolutely.
that you're going to make it through. You're going to I think that the calmest people that we know are people who have very strong faith that everything is going to turn out the way that it's meant to be.
Right.
And if you accept that, then going forward is much easier.
Right, but don't you also think that that goes hand in hand with some of that, internalized work? Because I think faith requires you to be able to have that conversation with yourself. It's dismissing, those lies that we tell ourselves, right? It's
Yes.
dismissing
Mhm.
doubt when it shows up. It's
That's right.
dismissing that fear of failure. It's dismissing the imposter syndrome aspect and being able to shine the light on like what we've talked about a lot is, we start going on those fact finding missions. And I think that that's how
Yeah.
we build that foundational work of faith. Um, but true faith in that sense is like, I don't even know if I'm right, but I know that I'm on the right path. So even if I'm wrong in my approach, it's
It's kind of like you'll jump and land on your feet.
right. Yeah. It's somebody I remember being younger and somebody saying, the definition of faith is jumping off a cliff and knowing you'll grow wings.
Yeah.
Like, but it's like knowing, right? It's not hoping, it's
Right.
not assuming, it's knowing.
It's
And
knowing. Yeah.
because that's like that, because that takes that leap of faith mindset a little bit forward, a little bit more.
Right.
And I kind of love that approach of like, taking that like that such, because I think on the surface, from the outside world, it can be almost seen as like ignorance a little bit. Like
Yeah.
it's like, but oftentimes the
Or
people
or being naive.
right, but people that walk that path with confidence, um, they've already dismissed the notion that, I think that we care about what other people think, but we don't necessarily have to care about their opinion.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's you're gonna feel your way. And I can care in the sense that we can express dialogue with one another, but I don't need to care in the sense that it's gonna impact my approach.
Right.
Right.
That goes back to what you were saying, right? About what you can and can't control. You can't control what other people think, feel, their opinion. All you can control is how you choose to process that. Are you going to let it interfere with you? Or are you going to say, I respect what you think, what you feel, but I'm going to go my own way.
Right. Which I
I
think is
don't,
how we should be navigating the world in general. Which is why I
right.
like and it's, it kind of brings up some of the stuff that we've been talking about a lot lately, like, with the political climate and all these things. It's like it's differing opinions. You and I, complete opposite in our belief system, but we also know that like what we bring to the table in conversation is also being able to say, I can respect that opinion, have a conversation that
Right.
that makes sense without having to change your mind. Right. It's like
Right.
I'm on my path, you're on your path. And the idea is like our paths are leading towards the same place. We're just choosing a different route to get there that makes sense for us.
Right. And when you have that relationship with people who have different ideas than you or different beliefs than you can also use that as a learning experience. It might be that we teach each other something
Right.
that we didn't know before, or we had never framed that in our mind that way, or we had never thought about something that way.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why it's so important to have people in your life who don't agree with you about everything.
Right.
Imagine how static your life would be if everybody you knew felt the same way you did, thought the same way you did, and you were never challenged in your beliefs.
Yeah. I think I actually find a lot of pride in my ability to kind of be a little bit more like malleable, like,
Right.
because I have that thirst for knowledge and like I'm fully aware and willing to admit that I don't have all the answers. Just don't tell my daughter that. Like, but
She'll find out soon enough.
oh, I think she already knows. But I think that's that approach. And I think that is, such an important part of like, we can follow blueprints, but at the end of the day, we've got to eventually write our own, and
Right.
it's, you've got to find what you kind of stand for, what your mission is, your vision is. And it is very much that interpersonal aspect. So kind of going into that next area of adventure, um, I specifically like felt called out when I recognized this, but I think as an adult, at some point, like we stop playing, right? We stop having that sense of, letting imagination take the driver's seat for a little bit, or
Right.
letting, something that we're really passionate about kind of like take the stage and foreground of our life. And now the key to this is obviously balance, but the beauty of it is when you really find things that you love, you know, the goal is to not have just a one-dimensional life, right? Like we are already like we're in relationships, like our romantic relationships, our children, our jobs, and our health, like are like going to be the things that we focus on for a big part of our lives, right? And there's
Mhm.
obviously some other aspects of that, but when we're not making something for ourselves that are beyond just what we do for a living and who we're with, it becomes stagnant, one dimensional. And then you wonder why people like have like midlife crises. And, we have these, towering divorce rates and all of these aspects that just like contribute to the fact that when we stop living, we're so in this rush to death in that sense that we forget that like, you're supposed to live. And that's, that shows up. Adventure can show up in like a passion, like painting or
Right.
music or, like for me, like I literally love putting on my hiking boots and going on legitimate adventures, but I think that it's so important that we have something like that in our lives so that we're not just sitting around like, and like, not to be like morbid, but I think, and if we look on the bigger scale, we zoom out, we kind of get to this place of just kind of sitting still and just waiting to die in that sense. If we're not,
Yeah.
kind of in the process of the doing,
And I think going back to kind of what you had said earlier, I think a lot of us get lost, right? Like, especially parents, once you have a child, you stop thinking of yourself as an individual and you become mom, right? Or you become dad. And that becomes your frame. That becomes how you see yourself and who you are, right? I'm a mom.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it stops there, right? I'm a mom, I'm a dad. And you start to define yourself by your children, which can, well, that's a discussion for another day, but you start to define yourself by your children, right? And so I think, like you said, like these midlife crises, or when you see people who have empty nest syndrome and they don't know what to do now that their kids are gone, right? Yeah. And so I think that as adults, we forget that we're still learning about ourselves. We're still developing, we're still growing. And so we have to remember to take time, like, we'll talk about this with self-love, self-care, but we have to take time to continue to develop ourselves, because after our kids are grown, we still exist. We still have purpose. Yep. And so you have to find something. We both love to travel. That's one of our things, like to see new places, experience new things. And so you cannot let yourself be defined by one term, like a mom or a dad. Or for some people, it might be a daughter when they take on the role of caring for their parent, right? So.
And I think it comes down to, and we get to this, so I think we are all here to fulfill a purpose of service to others. Right. I talked about that a lot. And I believe that ultimately we find our purpose in our ability to serve others. When we are serving from an empty cup, though, we are legitimately just in that we're no different than that same modality of kind of sitting still. Like we expend ourselves and then we, you kind of hermit for a little while because as a true empath, I've had to learn the skills of re-energizing in the process, because I think as we serve, we recognize that people are, I like to believe, unintentionally energy vampires, right? And so we have to understand that balance comes, and I think that's why. When I talk to adults and when I talk to coaching clients, I always try to ask them, when's the next thing that you have on your calendar that you're looking forward to? Mm-hmm. Outside of business, outside of your kids stuff, what is the next thing on your calendar that is for you that you are looking forward to? And most of the time, we draw a blank, right? Because it's even my next big trip that I'm going on is going to be a fantastic trip, but it's for my daughter's birthday.
Same thing here.
And we'll have fun and we'll do those things. But it's, so then it's all right, well, there's a concert that I want to go to. And so that makes sense for me. Or a hiking trip, those kind of things make sense. But I have to purposely put those things on my calendar and schedule them and block out that time, because I know that if I don't, it's the first thing that's going to go out the window as a priority, because the next things that's going to come up, or, we've got all these other responsibilities of, serving, others' needs, other obligations. And so, I think that's just a good gut check. Do I currently in my life right now have something that I'm looking forward to that's for me and only for me? And I think that's just a really good baseline gut check to be at.
Do you have something that's just for you?
Yeah,
on the calendar.
I actually have a concert that I'm going to in 2 weeks, and the last time that I saw this band was at the same venue 20 years ago.
Nice.
And they were a very influential band of mine, in college, and got to meet with them and jam with them, and so it's going to be a really cool full circle moment to see them in that same element, same thing, and so But that's something for me, like music. And then I have another hike scheduled in 2 weeks. And so those little things that might not be these big grand things, they fill me up so much that, and that's what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be for some people, it could be, I schedule time to read a book without interruption, without any, I have this time slot, to write a little bit, and those things, and you build on that, right? Like I love starting new art projects, and I'll
Right.
do because like I know for me, like I don't have a ton of time to work on it 2, 3, 4 hours at a time, like I like would like to. And so I'll start a painting and know that it's just going to be a month process, 20 minutes here, 20
Right.
minutes there, but I try to make sure that I'm doing that. So what about you?
Me, I try to always schedule every week lunch with my best friend is one of those small things that I always try to do. That carves out time for her and me to we've been best friends for 30 years. So it just gives us time to sit together, talk about our week, kind of unload to each other, vent if we need to. And then I have a trip for myself planned in October to Bermuda. Never been to Bermuda. I am so excited about it because my next trip is also for my daughter's birthday. So yeah, I'm really excited about Bermuda. It's one of my bucket list places to visit. So gonna check that off.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say, going back to talking about being in service to others, and especially if you're an empath or if you're someone who feeds off the energy or is impacted by the energy of others. And this, we will probably talk about this in future podcasts, but boundaries.
Yes.
It's really important to have boundaries, have a place where you say, yes, I'm in service to other people, but this is where I draw the line. This is where I say, we have to stop. We have to draw the line here for my own sense of peace, my own sense of, and so that's going to probably go into like self-care, self-love is being able to say, this is where I draw the line for myself.
Yeah. And I agree. Actually, I think that's the perfect transition because I think self-love, really the way that I look at self-love is self-love is not just about liking yourself, or it's not just your self-image or just your self-care. I think it's all of those things and more. So I embrace self-love on a sense more of like an eternal self-love, like really understanding yourself to the place where I know who I am. I know everything that like I'm about, like, and that's like loving your transgressions, like loving all the stupid stuff you did when you were younger because you understand why you did it, or you at least understand the motive and the progression, and also being able to say, I forgive myself, and also being able to say, I know where I am right now. I might not know where I'm going, but I have faith that where I'm going is where I'm supposed to be. And,
Right.
I truly believe that the relationship that we have with ourselves sets the precedent for every relationship that we have with others. And
Right.
so by saying that and it might sound a little interesting at times to say, I have to set boundaries with myself for myself, but
Yes.
I think it's key, right? Like, that might be how I talk to myself and say, hey, whoa, 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 you are being a little hard on yourself right now. And I mean,
Right.
we have as a team said, like, I'm a big critic of myself as soon as things aren't paying off, or as soon as sometimes, things are maybe a little bit tougher than it would. For the longest time, it was just back to the drawing board, and no, the boundary to myself is stay the course. My boundary to myself is, change that perspective right now, or you better have a moment of apologizing to yourself, and,
Right.
and those
I've
things,
seen
that process.
I've seen two things that really hit home for me. You see memes and you see people post things on social media. And the two things that I've seen recently are, one, talk to yourself like you would talk to a 6-year-old. When you talk internally to yourself, don't say anything to yourself that you wouldn't say to a 6-year-old child. And two, talk to yourself like you would talk to your dog. You're such a good boy.
Well, yeah. And I think that, like, when we talk about self-love, like, I think you really have to fall in love with yourself.
Right.
Like, think about, like, court yourself. Like, I like to think of it as like, okay, we all went through this pandemic of being quarantined, and like really solitude was kind of like forced on us. And I think about this in life. When we find ourselves alone, a lot of times in life, we find ourselves alone, not by our own choosing, right? Like we get broken
Right.
up with, we lose a family member, we lose a job, we go through a battle of depression or whatever it is, but we find ourselves in solitude, maybe not by our own choosing.
Right.
So we're being told to love yourself means to like love your time with yourself, and solitude becomes something different. And I will say, and I know that I'll bring this up a lot, my trip, it was like really the first time in my life, and it's ironic because it was done through, like on the, we'll call it the tail end of the quarantine, whatever you want to call it, because I don't even know what we call the state that we're in now. But it was the first time that I chose to really go down a path on my own for a long period of time. And really, that's where a lot of this stuff just like really was just like, I was in an echo chamber of clarity with all of this.
Right.
And it became a point of like choosing to just be in this place of me. And really, I saw a shift. It became, like the proverbial me versus me to me and me. I'm in partnership with my
Right.
mind, body, and soul. And to me, that's
Right.
how I recognize, like, it was the first time I was like, no, I'm in a healthy place of self-love now. Like I've thought about it. Like I like who I am. Like I've got, my charismatic demeanor. Like I feel like, like I keep a pretty uplifted spirit, and, I like who I am in general. The whole idea is like, would you date yourself? Would you be friends with yourself? And I'm like, yeah. Um, but then like that next notion of like when nobody's around, when nobody's there to hear what you have to say, when there's no spotlight, when the integrity really kind of like gets turned up a notch, when the brutal honesty, when the ugly truth shows up, you still love yourself. And
Right. I think it goes to show too how another way you and I are very different. You're an extrovert. So I don't know how much time previous in your, in your past you spent really thinking about yourself, but I'm an introvert. So I do choose to spend quite a bit of time with myself.
So I think that I am a very like, I think it's the ADHD, OCD in me that like, I'm very much an overthinker. And so what I have allowed myself to really sit with is like, there's a big difference between like overthinking and being introspective.
Right.
Like it's like going on a discovery of self is not the same thing as criticizing and analyzing yourself. And I think that
Right.
that's the process of like, courting yourself, falling in love with yourself. What do you like? What do you really like? Do you like this because you're told you're supposed to like this? Or do you legitimately have something that's drawing you toward, and understanding and uncovering those kind of aspects, I think really get us to that place of, oh no, this is element. And just like anything else on this list of elements, these are things that we're constantly doing, right? It's just part of the
Yeah.
process for showing up.
Right.
And speaking of, like now we kind of go into one of our favorite topics, which is visibility, like the
Right.
actual act of showing up. Because I
Of
think,
being visible.
right. So now that we've worked on our mindset and we have our spirituality intact, and we've got the sense of adventure and self-love, we've now equipped ourselves enough to be able to start like, because really visibility, you could shift that word and change it out with demonstration.
Right.
Right. Visibility to me is just the act of demonstrating in a visible manner.
Right.
We're putting our gifts, our skills, and our relationship with ourselves on display to now live into purpose. And really that's what visibility is to me. It's that act of demonstrating your gifts, of demonstrating your purpose, demonstrating that warrior spirit outward, with the idea that by being visible, it is allowing yourself to actually project and create, play out your purpose in real time.
Right. And I think that if you've gone through the steps of self-love, which I'm still going through, I think it takes courage to say that, but I also think a lot of people go through a real journey when they start to try to learn to love themselves.
Yep.
But I think once you pass through that, you have confidence. And I think confidence goes hand in hand with visibility. And we're going to talk about it next is vulnerability. And so in being visible, there is a lot of that of being vulnerable and being confident, which almost seem like they should be opposites, but they're not. I think they work hand in hand together. That if you've done the self-love work, that you're confident in yourself. And so you know that you can be visible, and in being authentically visible, you have to be a little bit vulnerable, right?
Yeah. And I think that it's key to say that, like, visibility has to come before vulnerability, because it comes from the notion of you have to start, right? Like you
Yes.
have to start, you have to almost start, not fully prepared, because like through the process you get prepared, you fine tune it, you learn your voice by using your voice, right?
Right. And that's what we've done today. Like we just said, we're not in a perfect studio. We don't have the perfect equipment, but you know what? We have something to say. We want to get it out there. And so we're just going to start. Yeah. We're following our own advice.
That's right. We've talked about it for 2 years, and we're like, you know what? We could talk about it for another 2 years, or we could just do it, let it be. And I think this is the path to that's the path to greatness, right? It's right. It's in my I want to write books, I want to do this, I want to do that. It's the key for me is like, well, the first person that wrote a book didn't have a blueprint. They just did it, right? The first person that ever made a movie or made anything, they figured it out and they did it. And there was this video that I saw on TikTok about a year or so ago that really just like spoke to me. And it was this like, I love The Simpsons. Absolutely love The Simpsons. I just always have, and just I just think it's just a generational cult classic. Like for anyone that's been alive, like really for the last 30 years,
right.
But the whole idea is they first showed up on the Tracy Ullman show as the most horrific looking sketches, right? Like very joggy, very almost like old school, like craftsman style, like approach to art. But they evolved into, an iconic, imagery that we all know. Like if you see the color in the lettering, the characters, if you hear, the names, like it just all kind of like brings you back to a feeling or emotion or some sort of tangible. Right. And now obviously that's like kind of on that branding side aspect. But the point being is, if they didn't just start with what they had, and waited to have that ironed out perfection, it wouldn't matter as much. We wouldn't be as connected because we got to be a part of that experience of the growth with it, Right. And I think that is part of the process. To really be a warrior, it's work done solo.
Right.
To be able to serve the masses. And really it's to, you build your tribe. Like, we can all be a part of multiple tribes in that sense, but by being visible and demonstrating, it's inspiring, it's impacting, and it might not even be from the place of your purpose. Sometimes it's just like, I saw them do something, so that's making me want to do something.
Right. And I think too, when you start talking about visibility, you go back to spirituality, how we were talking about faith. And you have to take that leap of faith, right? Like you have to say, I'm going to start and I'm going to keep going. And that is part of being a warrior. Also, I'm going to keep going and it's going to work out.
Right.
It's going to work out. And I think to really and honestly be visible, you have to say, okay, I'm just going to start where I am. This is where we are. We have, and when we talk about visibility, we break it down in our visibility membership. And part of that is we talk about vision statement, and your vision statement is where you want to go. And so if you have that good idea in your brain, whether it's business, personal, in your life, if you say, this is my vision and this is where I want to go, You got to take that leap of faith to start to get there, right? You start with 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, and they might be tiny, they might be small, but you have to say, this is going to work. That's why I love entrepreneurs. That's why I'm passionate about them, because they've had the courage and they've said, okay, I'm going to be visible. This is where I'm going to start.
Right. I think
I used to be so scared. And this goes back to what you were saying about serving other people. I used to be so scared to tell people what I did. Like, I didn't want them to think I was pushing myself on them. And then I had someone say to me, and this goes back to mindset, it reframed how I thought about what I do. And that is, someone needs what you offer. Someone out there needs what you have to offer. And that doesn't just go to being a business person. In your personal life, the things that you have to offer, somebody out there needs that. And so if you hide in your room and you're scared to get out there are people who are suffering because you are not out there being visible, showing yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's, that key element right there, right? It's when we have conviction in our story, when the story doesn't have to change again. Like, we don't have to, like, once you write your story on your heart and your mind in the world, you don't have to do that work over again, right? And once you believe it and know that that's the truth, then it just becomes a matter of like consistency and a matter of you've already found the proof. Now it's just a matter of doing the consistent work, doing the showing up, doing the demonstration. It becomes almost that matter of when, not if mentality.
Right. And we do talk about this too, as we kind of break down how to become visible, what visibility means. A big part of that is consistency. Yeah. You have to show up consistently for people to trust you, right? And so that goes into building authority. But to do that, to build authority, for people to trust you, for people to recognize you for what you are, whether it again is business or personal, you have to be consistent. Yep. You can't show up today and then show up 3 weeks from now. People don't have any trust in you.
Right.
They don't trust that you're going to show up when you say you're going to show up.
Right.
And that can be in any facet of your life, right? If you're in a relationship, you're dating someone and you say, and you want to be visible to the person you're dating, right? If you say, let's go out on Sunday, and you go out on Sunday, then you say, let's go out on Tuesday, they're going to trust that you're going to show up on Tuesday, right? But if you don't show up on Tuesday, they're going to lose faith in you.
Yeah. And I think that way to like really garner that trust is really rooted in the ability to be vulnerable, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's how we demonstrate, right? I can talk surface level. We could all have those surface level comments and conversations, and I might show up and I might be seen everywhere, but being seen is not the same as being valued and being able to deliver value and being trusted. Exactly. Versus one of the things that I've really made an effort for this last year is my stance on vulnerability. Like, for me personally, was to kind of get off the fence. And start really being matter of factly with how I think, how I feel, how I believe, what my values truly are. Because as a coach and somebody who's really trying to help people transform into what I like to call is the best life they always deserve, not a consolation life. It's the idea of, I have to be true to what that means then. And so for me, I probably am maybe over vulnerable, maybe an overshare in some aspects, but I'm very comfortable with myself to be able to say, hey, look, I'm exposing it all because that's my process and that works for me. But vulnerability also means showing up and saying, I need help, or being vulnerable is saying, I don't have the answers, but I know how to find it, and vulnerability, I think, really plays that line of fluctuation of being able to say, it's taking off the mask, taking off the armor, and showing up, naked, afraid, and vulnerable, or naked, unafraid, and vulnerable in that sense.
I think too that you can see the stepping stones, right? one of the scariest things in the world to do is ask for help, to say, I need help. And we feel like when we ask for help, we're less than, to say, I need help, or I don't have it all together. And this is a big thing in the mental health world, right? There's a lot of shame and there is a lot of judgment for people who say, I need help. But I also wanted to talk about the stepping stones, right? Like we talked about mindset to begin with. And we said, when you think of yourself as a victim versus a warrior, if you're a victim, or if you think of yourself as a victim, or you feel that you've been victimized, it's really, really hard to be vulnerable. So it's really important for you to follow those steps and for you to go on that journey of mindset, spirituality, self-love. And you have to get to a place where you can say, okay, I'm strong enough to be vulnerable. Right. Because again, if you think about warrior in the terms of becoming stronger and battling through something, that can be internal, right? That can be you're battling through, yes, you're a survivor. Yes, you've been through these things, but now through these steps, you can hit a place where it's okay to be vulnerable, right? Where you don't have to be scared.
And I think it's important to recognize the fact that like vulnerability is not meant to be comfortable, but it is certainly not meant to be overtly discomfortable.
Right.
Like if you feel like you are not being true to yourself in the sense of like, maybe there's some rooted trauma that you're just trying to like push through. Well, that's just going to keep showing up. Like, you know, right. That's why you do have to do the work, you know, and maybe in those areas of discomfort really is what allows us to highlight. And vulnerability doesn't mean always projecting the vulnerability out to the world. I think that very much like anything else, vulnerability starts with being vulnerable with yourself, admitting, hey, I need help with this, or admitting that thing that I thought that I healed, or that thing that I thought that I really got over is rearing its ugly head again. So why is this, you know, like I'm a big believer in, you know, so I, over the years have tried to really transition, you know, and I go back and forth from like a linear way of thinking to a cyclical way of thinking. Like,
right.
I think, you know, mentally, like a calendar, you know, literally revolves in a cycle, you know, when we flip a calendar, versus the fact that like our days go, you know, infinite, you know? And so that's how I mentally visualize. I go back and forth on, you know, which one, you know, is the right one. And I think that either one is the right way. I like to kind of sit more in the revolution kind of approach, because you know that word just to me speaks a lot more wonder. Like, you know, a revolution, you know, we think of it as like an uprising, but like a revolution, you know, like as a car guy, like RPM, it's a revolution, it's a full cycle spin, it's a turn,
right?
And the idea is we're moving forward, we're rolling on, we're making roll.
Sorry, but revolution can be internal, right? Like you can say, I'm going to start a revolt against my mindset, against the way that I'm thinking.
Yep.
I'm going to revolt against myself, against my limiting beliefs. Another thing that I read that had a big impact on me was, until we learn the lesson, we continue to cycle through it. And that's kind of like how if you have a trauma or you have something in the past that you haven't really faced, it's going to be a cycle. You're going to continue to face it. That's going to continue to be a stumbling block until you find the strength to work through it. And it's hard. It is hard work. But when you go through it, it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Again, like you were saying, if you're pushing yourself in your vulnerability and you get to a place that isn't honest to yourself or is very discomfortable, that's when you need to set that boundary for yourself, right? Like you said, sometimes it's interesting, but sometimes you need to set a boundary inside of yourself, from yourself. That's a good place to draw a boundary, is to say, okay, now I'm not being authentic to myself. Now I'm going somewhere where I'm not meant to go. I'm going to draw the line and I am going to have a reckoning with myself. I'm going to say, we're not going down this path. This isn't where we're going. And once you learn to do that, I think it can be very powerful in your life.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned the most over the last like year and a half, 2 years is that there's a huge difference between a comfort zone and a safe space.
Right.
Like your comfort zone is the area where you kind of like coddle yourself in the sense of like your abilities. You don't push beyond, but you might give yourself this belief of thriving or success, right? Whereas a
Right.
safe space is a place that you have allowed yourself to expand beyond your abilities and challenge yourself by being vulnerable while knowing that you are within the confines of your self-trust and your self-beliefs and your ability to say, I'm going to hold myself accountable and these boundaries that I'm not going to overstep what I'm ready for.
Right. Exactly. And it also goes back, right? And this is why we have these steps, right? Because it goes back to spirituality again. And when we say faith, it's not just faith in an outer element, but having faith inside, faith in yourself. And so when you become more aware of yourself, when you learn to trust yourself, when you have faith in yourself, that's when you can more accurately say, this is not serving me. This is, I trust myself, just like your gut instinct, right? I trust myself. I have faith in myself to know this is not for me. This is something that I don't want to do. I think we go back and forth, right? When we have to make a decision and we're scared to trust ourselves. We're scared to have faith in ourselves. So I think once you start to do that kind of internal work, you begin to understand that you have the power to make the right decision in your own life.
Right. And I think how that shows up is that final element is impact, right?
Right.
I literally wear it across my chest with pride because it literally is, it's funny, like, you kind of, you think about, this idea of having a life purpose and a mission, and we overcomplicate it all too often.
I
And,
do this all the
and
time.
what it always boils down to is like, I like to tell, like, so I had this conversation with my daughter yesterday. She said, she's in seventh grade and, getting ready to, kind of go into age. She's got a lot of interests, a lot of hobbies. And she said, I don't really know what I want to do when I get older. And I was like, well, I got a
Me
question
either.
for you. I said, what do you like to do that comes so easy and so natural to you that you might even avoid doing it because it's just so easy to do? And, we kind of talked about, what that might be. And then like that next question was, is it something that you can find different elements in that you find fulfillment? Well, yeah. Well, can you use this to then change other people's lives? And I think that you could answer anything in those, that you can maybe answer those questions. And it's going to be different for everyone. Because I believe that our purpose in our life is the same. Everyone's purpose is the same, which is service to others. I think when we
Right.
serve ourselves and we try to find fulfillment in that, it falls flat. And you might get those short bursts of fulfillment, but over the long course of time, over the course of history, we found that like service to others really is what brings that ultimate fulfillment and gives you a purpose and drive. What I think we're really searching for is the instrument of service, which
Right.
shows up in how we can impact the lives of others.
Right.
And I think that that's why that's a key element. While that is part of the purpose itself, I think it's also an element because it's a structured approach. Is how we create impact is based off of our skills, our gifts, our abilities. And it's also important that through our visibility and vulnerability, we are honing our ability to not just demonstrate, but actually do it. It's like as a business owner, we have to do our operations
Mhm.
and our sales and marketing. It's kind of that same mindset. But we've got to be able to project it while also being the act of the doing. And I think that
Right.
that's going to be different for everybody. But I think just summing it up is that is your ability to impact others. My whole mission with all of this is to get people to that place of impacting others and that ripple effect. And my mission at this point is to impact the lives of 1 million people, and I'm
Right.
very, very, outspoken about that. And then we scale that, right? Because if I can do that, my mentality is if I can work on this next, season of my life, impacting the lives of 1 million people, then the next iteration from there is to start creating generational impact. And then from there,
Right.
it's like the legacy of impact. And like,
Right.
and it's not a matter of me, it's a matter of the work that I can do and the effects that can be played out by, uh, getting to the points of, if you can duplicate your energy in other people, and we see that as, with teaching, we see that, in business,
Parenting.
and parenting, and, it's, impact is no different than kind of like leaving that imprint. It's, you change the world by waking up. It's you
Right.
change the world when you allow yourself to shift your beliefs or be a little bit open-minded or share your experience. That's why I'm so like forthcoming about the fact that I don't need to change people's minds. I want to be able to have conversations with them to be able to get a different perspective. And if anything, I want them to change my mind. Like by all means,
Right.
I am open-minded to the point where like I think the greatest gift you can give yourself is the ability to change your mind and having a
Right.
conversation, having that, because that is that level of impact. It's funny. I actually, with everything going on in the world, and the other day, or lately, the other day I looked up, like what's the definition of a fact, right? Like who determines what a fact is, right? Like we talk, like everything's about like, we're in marketing and media and all that. And so like this whole idea of misinformation, well, everything is misinformation until it's not. And some things
Right.
we think are not. And that's not to go down this diatribe of like what legit, manipulative concepts, are. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like the determining factors of belief, right? Like, because if we lived solidarity of like, just facts, it'd be no different. I don't see a lot of room for like that passion in living a life of just fact. Like we erase faith from it. We erase human instinct and inhibitions when we are trying to just go down that path. And so when we are able to have conversations that of free flowing thinking, I believe this way because I believe this way versus I believe this because I've done research or experience, we then can hold more weight to our convictions. And
Right.
I'm truly convicted in all of my work that I do here. But that doesn't mean these outliers of who I am as a person doesn't get to change and fluctuate based off the people that I meet or the information that I come in contact with. And so that's why I
One
think that that's just as much an opportunity for impact as the work that we do.
one thing that really changed my mind about like what is a fact is, I talk a lot about psychology and branding. I'm real big into color. And so ask yourself, is the sky always blue? Is the sky always blue? Is that the color of the sky? Well, so I'm doing this research, I'm looking into this, and come to find out, ancient Greeks didn't have a color for blue. They didn't have a word for blue,
Right.
for the color blue. So it was not blue to them. So it's not a fact that the sky is always blue, right? It's how you frame it in reference to you and your culture and all the things that go into making you who you are. So a fact is not always a fact, right? A fact depends on who you are, how you were raised, what your culture is. And so we have to be open-minded that even a fact for us might not be a fact for someone else.
Yeah. And so when I looked it up, what I found was everything pointed me towards epistemology. The theory of knowledge, especially with regard to its methods, validity, and scope. Epistemology is the investigation of what distinguishes justified belief from opinions. And that is that's the Oxford Dictionary. But like, to me, like there's a lot of beauty in that, right? Like
Yeah.
being able to say like, it's a theory of knowledge. Like I love philosophy. I love the idea
Me
that
too.
we have the opportunity to learn something new. That's why I, read so much and documentaries and, I love having conversations. The whole point of this podcast is to explore and really understand how this episode is about us defining what it means to be a warrior, right?
Right.
the goal of this podcast is to talk to people that challenge that, but also contribute and change the perspectives and add their voice to the different aspects of that, because it should be about the thirst for knowledge and how we understand it, and how one person sees it might not be how other people see it, because there's, our environments that we grew up in, the belief systems of those around us, how we were taught to believe something, the schools that we went to. There are so many different ways. And so for us to try to fit into this box just never made sense for me. And so having the ability to have this as a platform where we can have conversations is, it makes me giddy inside of the fact that
it makes me very excited.
We have opportunities, and the fact that we are on our first episode now, and we've already got some really amazing guests lined up through April is just so exciting.
It is very exciting.
I kind of want to just end this with kind of two different aspects that I think really help with defining us to be able to stand up as a warrior. And they kind of come in the posing of two questions. And this is where I see from a societal standpoint, because I hear it all the time. When people ask you, what do you do? Right. It's the mentality of the answer generally when somebody says, well, what do you do? I think we're so quick to respond with our job.
Yep.
Or
I know I always do.
Versus where I think, because when I talk about being a warrior, I think it's really all engulfing of your life. You become that in which you are in that sense.
Right.
And so the answer to that is what you're passionate about. Right.
Right.
Well, what do you do? For me, my answer is I impact people's lives.
Right.
My job is my life, is my career, is my family, is all of it, right? Because it changes from, I work in IT or I own a marketing company to, what do you do? Well, I impact people's life. It's the action-oriented mentality,
right?
Warrior. And that to me that's not me going to battle. That's me having the strength to know that that's my purpose and that's how I show up. And so I think that's just really good temperature gauge. And then the second is who are you? We talked earlier, it's that's one of the greatest questions of all time. And I feel blessed at my age to be able to answer that with, I'm a warrior.
Right.
And to me, it's not lost on me that I, have this immense blessing of being able to have that with certainty. And for me, that challenge to myself is can I help others get there too? Because if somebody can answer what they do with an answer that provides passion to them and who they are with something of conviction, that to me, that's a good recipe for where people are in life and in their journey.
Right.
So that was pretty awesome.
That was interesting.
I think we unpacked a lot. So in this, whole process, we are going to be doing, for the next 2 weeks, we are going to jump into to my warrior story, really talking a lot about my health journey and, how we even got to this place of, the warrior lifestyle. And I think for us to, before we start talking with guests and stuff, I really want to lay this out. So I'm glad today we were able to define it. So people understand that when we say warrior, we're not talking about, this
get your sword and your shield.
Exactly. Which, it's ironic. So I have this love for Roman gladiators. I literally have a Roman gladiator tattooed on my arm as Saint Michael, the Archangel, which is the most full circle way that you can approach it. But it's that same mentality of all of these aspects are just as those elements of strength. Right. So getting into the story, hopefully over the next 2 weeks, we'll be able to also peel back some of those layers. And then when we start getting into our guests, I think it'll give us an opportunity to we've already laid the foundation then of being able to have the discussions with some understanding as, people listen, as we post these versus kind of going back. I think it'll just keep it all very connective and stuff. The second other element that we're doing, which because all of these podcasts are recorded and then, we'll put out, is we're recording with live audiences. And so we have our, visibility membership and have that aspect of, letting them stay on for our as our virtual audience. And so as we bring on guests and, and if, today, leaving some space towards the end for, Q&A, letting them getting involved to have some conversation. So, we do have Beth on. If you had any questions of this from this episode or just in general, would love to hear your feedback. And very excited that Beth is actually going to be a guest on
Yes.
one of our episodes, coming up, which would be really awesome. So,
yeah, we're excited.
Thank you. I'm excited too. Yeah, this was great.
Hi, Beth.
Hi guys. I love how you went through the 7 elements of that. Excuse me. I've been kind of around Michael for probably about a year or so now, I think. But I don't know if I've heard it laid out quite. Like I can see the elements of all that and what you talk about for sure. But to see it laid out in those 7 things is fantastic. And then I made a comment over on the Facebook page too. Just I kept making notes of things. You guys are dropping a lot of great sound bites and questions to reflect on and things today. So I'm excited to see where these conversations go over the next podcast recordings.
Yeah. And I think that was that's why we kind of knew that now was the right time too. It's like I've spent very much like the last year living into all of these things as visibly as I could. But you're right. Like, how often are we laying it out? And I think from a business perspective, like, and very much like the masterclass you just had, it's like, these are words that, certainly are on my list of like, the word bank, but they're much more than words because these are also like the action statements that have, the ability to, I could create a blueprint for each one of these. And, in a lot of ways, each element is in itself like a different service or whatnot. But there are also these different attributes and characteristics that make up the bigger picture. And, really one of the reasons why we wanted to lay it out was we've been really talking to a variety of voices that we can bring on. And by laying it out like this, it might not always make sense why somebody's a guest on the podcast until, unless we say, this is, the aspect of it, right? Like, there's just like some really interesting people that we've talked to that on the surface level might not make sense, but through the conversation, because it'd be easy to just interview somebody that has a story every week and say, oh, you've been through a struggle and, and by all means, like we will certainly talk with people that are just a badass warrior themselves. But I think one of the elements that I'm really excited about is people that are going to challenge, like I said, these elements and challenge what it means to have the mindset of a warrior, or, to have the embracing power of spirituality, or, how to really go on an adventure that is serving yourself and others. And
hopefully it'll kind of change their mind when we talk to someone who you think, oh, they're not a warrior, but we forget even the smallest interaction in our life, like even your hairdresser. Like if you think about the person who cuts your hair, right? They are impacting your life. And so you might think, oh, why would you ever, and I don't think we have a hairdresser, but why would you ever talk to a hairdresser? Well, because quite literally, they have a huge impact on your life. They are in service to you. They are in service to other people, and they have a lot of power to impact your life. So I think that what Mike and I hope is that when we talk to people and you're like, oh, why they're not a warrior, but we all are. And when you think of serving people, that goes so much deeper than just on the surface, right? It's everyone, no matter what they do, have the power to impact your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that goes to Michael's point earlier of not what do you do at work versus what do you do at home, what do you do in your personal life. But, all of those become, I am what I am in every situation. And,
right.
And I bring my warriorness to every element. And Yeah, I mean, I help small business owners with their copy and their messaging, and we have to talk a lot about visibility, vulnerability, mindset, impact, just in things in like writing social media copy.
Yeah.
I think people forget how powerful words are. And, you know, the right wordsmith, the right copywriter, the right person who you talk to can help you use words to make your point to really, as a web designer, I am very aware of the impact that a copywriter can make just in the words that you put on your website. It is such a difference when you see someone.
Yeah. And then when you have those right words, I tell my clients all the time, start your day by reading your own website and remind yourself who you are and what you're here to do. And it becomes that act of affirmation as well of, hey, I'm making an impact. Let's go get them, Tiger. kind of.
I worked with a professional copywriter to write my bio. And I know when I read it, I'm so impressed with myself.
Yes.
I was like, that's me.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I'm excited to see what you guys do. I'm honored that you invited me to be part of the conversation in a few weeks. And I look forward to it.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you. We're not, our biggest goal is to try to like keep this, let this go as long as there's value. But, as soon as the conversation's over, we're done, and I think that's, that's the goal, right? It's like, let's try to pour as much value into it. I've heard a lot of podcasts that are like, well, that could have been an email kind of thing,
Yeah.
So it's, so it's just like saving that space. And, obviously we're going to edit these and we'll put it out like, on a week delay. But that's one of the cool things I think about the visibility membership aspect is like, y'all get the raw, uncut, in the moment aspect of it, which is, I think, pretty cool. So, yeah. Hey, Warriors, it's Michael, and I want to thank you for listening to the Warrior of Impact podcast. Make sure that you subscribe to us on your favorite streaming platforms and leave us a 5-star review. For more information, check out warriorofimpact.com.